That thing's happened again. You know the thing. That thing where you are quite content with all the games that you are currently playing through at the moment. You have a nice balance of genres, just enough free time to be enjoying them equally, and then something happens that sets off a trigger point of an old gaming memory. This happens in many different ways. It can be simply stumbling across a game in your collection that you thought you had forgotten about, perhaps seeing a screenshot, hearing a piece of music, or the most common one, listening to someone share a memory about the game. For me it was the latter, and had it been any of the others the result would have been nearly exactly the same. Drop everything else because you've decided that all current games are suddenly shit and this old piece of nostalgia is the best thing ever. I like to call this retrolapsing, and for me this week I took a big old hit of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. I shouldn't think that I really have to introduce the Resident Evil series by now. I like to think, well hope really, that the games prior to 4 are still modern enough to have been experienced by today's gamers. Having said that, this game came out in 1999, which makes most of today's legal drinkers the age of 3 years old at the time, and shit does that make me feel old. For anyone out there who doesn't possess a brain remotely interested in gaming, and why you would be watching this video if you didn't is beyond me, the original Resident Evil trilogy was a staple of early 3D gaming, making a name for itself predominantly on the PlayStation 1, but also making appearances on the Sega Saturn, Dreamcast and GameCube. For me, and probably only me, I experienced these titles on the PC, with high resolutions, frame rate, loading times, and all those things no one cared about. Where most people will have fond memories of opening up that PS1 lid, clicking in a CD and reaching for that glorious greyish pad, mine were of taking one of those big boxes off the shelf, opening it up like it was an awesome gaming chest and reaching for whatever controller I liked that the PC had to offer. I really miss PC pads being a new and exciting thing. Everything now is just plug and play your 360 pad, and while that works fine, I don't think it holds a candle to picking from what was probably hundreds at the time your favourite one. I can make a whole video on PC peripherals, but for anyone growing up in the late 80s or early 90s who had PC orientated friends, you will know how rare it was that two people had the same controller. A lot of people had joysticks, and because button mapping has always been a thing with PC games, you would often use a joystick for everything, whether that be an FPS like Doom or something better suited like Stargunner. Anyway, after the disappointment of buying two Gravis grip pads for £10, which were modelled on the best console controller there ever was, only to find out they used serial ports rather than USB, my PC gaming when not using keyboard and mouse was necessitated by my trusty old 6-button Microsoft Sidewinder. Holding this again actually made me a little angry with myself that I didn't use it to play through Resident Evil 3 with, as it still works, but I forgive myself as the Mad Catz fight pads are the last good controller to be released. Just got a little bit off track there. Resident Evil 3 then. When the game begins we are shown a cutscene which needs no narration, letting us know that the T-Virus outbreak is storming its way through Raccoon City, coinciding closely with the events of Resident Evil 2. This time around we catch up with one of our heroines from the original Resident Evil in form of Jill Valentine, who appears to have become appropriately more macho since her first outing, as she tries to escape the city without being eaten. We are literally blown out of the building we are staying in and dropped right into the action. I really like this approach. This is something that Resident Evil 2 started a trend for. The original Resident Evil took its time building atmosphere, and it was a fair few minutes before you even reached a zombie, and after this enemies along with ammo were few and far between, and we all know the score, so rather than having unnecessary reintroductions of one enemy for our character to be surprised exists, we are left to fend for ourselves. And by ourselves is one big difference that separates this game from its predecessors. Prior to this we have always had two choices of characters with slightly different plots and locations, something Resident Evil 2 expanded on with its second scenarios. That isn't to say that this time around is without branching paths. In fact, this is the first instalment to really introduce choice, but I'll get to that in a little bit. Being the third in the series, Resi 3 is the most accomplished when using the engine it's created in. Things are a lot more refined and faster now without losing the charm of what we are used to. Perspective wise, nothing has changed. We are still operating a character around a 3D space encased within a 2D backdrop and a static camera. But the lack of physical environment is never made too apparent due to the high resolutions these backdrops are displayed at. And these environments, as they have always been, are beautifully well realised and drawn, something that could so easily have been ignored due to how long you actually spend in some of these places. You might see the perspective of say an alleyway perhaps twice for 3 seconds at a time as you run through, but each render has had care taken to craft it into the aesthetic we've all grown to love. To coincide with our drawn environments, we also have our trademark fixed perspective and tank controls. People will often slate the tank controls as being awkward and primitive, and other things that simply aren't true, not to me anyway. You take away the ability to aim up and down in Resident Evil 4 say, and the controls are pretty much exactly the same but with the camera over the shoulder. For anyone unsure what is meant by tank controls, you can only turn on the spot or in an arc when moving forwards or backwards. There is no sidestepping or instantly facing a direction like you would in something like Crash Bandicoot. I actually really like these controls, and they fit the fixed camera perspectives perfectly, as often the camera will shift to have you facing a different part of the screen whilst progressing forward, and having any other controls would cause you to turn in an opposing direction every time this happened. As you begin the game, and in turn your escape from Raccoon City, you will notice that there is much more of an open experience to what we have been used to. In comparison to our previous sanctuary inside the mansion and police station, we are now roaming the streets with branching paths and interconnecting buildings along the way. Zombies are scattered around the city right from the get-go, and with our limited ammo and initially non-linear routes to explore, we have a heightened sense of caution with which way we should progress. The zombies this time round, along with your character, are a lot faster in terms of their animation, making it harder to simply run by, so using your ammo up at certain points will be unavoidable. Gunplay, as with the previous games, is done from a stationary point of draw and can be aimed ahead, up or down. Bullets now hit enemies in all stages of their animation cycle, which is something that was hit and miss in the previous games. By that, I mean aiming down whilst an enemy is standing up, for instance, will result in a hit, rather than shooting through him and hitting the floor until his walk cycle kicks back in. Along with these welcome additions, you also get the combat dodge, which I'll be honest, I never really got the hang of. It just seems to work sometimes. I think if you hit the attack button at the same time an enemy attacks you, you will propel yourself out of the way, but it's so hard to judge when an enemy's attack is going to hit that I left it up to chance. Early on, if you counter-intuitively clear a horde of zombies from a nearby building, you will acquire the trademark shotgun to your arsenal, which can help you out greatly if you become unstuck. And luckily, as with most of the weapons in this game, the shotgun is satisfying to use. When I was younger, I used to rate a game in my head by how well the shotgun sounded and looked, and this one is a winner. The one from Code Veronica, however, is a stinker. As you explore these streets, you will accrue an inventory of certain items, primarily herbs, ammo and documents. The documents, as before, are the game's way of letting you explore the story further if you wish, and I always appreciate this mechanic as it gives the player a choice as what they want to experience from the game. Along your way, as to be expected, there are also small puzzles for you to overcome, and these in the past have mostly adhered to adventure game logic, where a certain item the creator has thought up must be used with something else in order to progress, where in reality there will be hundreds of different ways to overcome these problems. I'll give you a little example. Early on you must find some lighter fluid which must be used to refill a lighter, would you believe it, in order to burn away some dried rope around the gate in order to go through. These occurrences are always a little bit silly, as I'm relatively sure a blast from my shotgun or simply untying the rope would have done fine. That is me nitpicking, to be honest. Resident Evil 3 for the most part has pretty logical barriers. Finding a manhole cover to open a manhole, can't argue with that. A fire hose to attach to the water to put out a fire, sound reasoning. Putting a stone disc in the hand of a statue so it gives me a car, but hang on a second here. I joke, of course, it wouldn't be Resident Evil without silly leaps of logic. I mentioned earlier about choice being a factor, and this happens in two ways. The first is in the order in which you visit locations. Sometimes trigger points of enemy encounters or character interactions can happen or be missed by when you visit them, or where you go before or after they do happen. From what I can remember, this results in Carlos, who you meet early on, either turning up or not to help you in key fights. And the other big choice mechanic, which I have put off mentioning up until now, is with the titled Nemesis. Nemesis is the standout here, and he defines the game, a constant harassment hell-bent on wiping out members of the STARS team. He will chase you through doors, turn up unexpected, and add genuine tension to any location you might be revisiting. You might be thinking that when I prefixed his encounters with adding choice to the game, I was referring to the way the game prompts you to either fight with him or run away, and that is sort of the case, but for different reasons. You see, Resident Evil is always referred to as survival horror, and I think that's true with the original. It was slow and moody, atmospheric and tense, but after this, I think they have emerged more as to what Capcom is better known for, and that's being an arcade game. You might not think it when you first play it, but once you know the game, it sticks with you in the same way an arcade game would. I haven't played through this game in years, and I instinctively knew where to go and what to do, and finished it in one sitting, clocking in at 3 hours 28 minutes, which genuinely surprised me. Although my E rank I was given surprised me even more. Bloody game, I'm sick of it. If you choose to ignore reading the documents, it's run and gun action with inventory management and a few logic puzzles to solve. I don't mean that in a negative way at all. This is what the game turns into after you have finished it a few times, and it only adds to the game's replayability. But, to get to the point I was trying to make, you do have a choice here, and that is to fight Nemesis at all of these encounters. This transforms your experience back into survival horror, and it's there entirely as an option. If you're playing on hard mode, and if not, why are you being such a big puff? Every time you fight and temporarily beat Nemesis, he will drop an item, and to acquire all the items he has, you'll pretty much need to fight him every time you see him, and Nemesis is not an easy fight, especially early on, when all you have is a shotgun pistol and a few healing items. Each time I encountered him, he drained my inventory and almost always left me in critical condition, rendering me useless, knowing that if I wasn't from then on really careful and managed my inventory properly, I wouldn't have a chance of beating him the next time round. And because of the items he drops, you are never fighting him for tokenistic reasons. Nemesis has some of the best weapons and useful healing items in the game on him, which you will need if you wish to continue fighting him further. You can bow out at any point if you feel too overpowered, but it's knowing that you're going to miss out on something that keeps you fighting, and these fights can get really intense when you know that you have a limited inventory. For example, one particular battle towards the later stages of the game where my status was red with danger and I was out of healing items, I managed to win by one shotgun blast before it was too late, only to find that during the fight, I had actually stood up to concentrate more. And that's what I mean by choice. You don't have to fight Nemesis, albeit for a few key times throughout the game, but if you choose to, the game for me anyway, transforms to a whole new level of difficulty and intenseness with an altered consideration for your ammo and healing items. There are a few key moments where the option system in the game will have one that will disable Nemesis without you fighting him, which will be enough to get you the Eagle Pistol without having him fight back, but do note if you are going to push on you will get, and spoilers here, the awesome flip action Western shotgun, which I have a bit of a boner for, 2 cases which come holding 3 first aid sprays each, and I think on the PlayStation version if you finish the game once, but on the PC version as standard, you get the machine gun. Regardless of how you choose to play the game, you'll be treated to new locations frequently, and the pace that you reach them is pleasingly fast and they never outstay their welcome. In fact, the pace of progression is the most frantic of the whole series, and you never get the sense that there is pre-planned time to simply wander around and explore the area you're in. New areas bring new enemies and weapons, and most all of these are unique. You have your expected zombies, dogs, crows and spiders making an appearance for good measure, but you also have new enemies that take more of an insect approach. You have the Drain Demus, Dimos, I don't know how you say it, which resemble giant fleas that will try and suck out your blood. Big worms, which never really cause you too much problems if you run straight past. A massive worm, which does cause you big problems and is slightly too phallic for my liking. And we have the return of the Hunters from Resident Evil 1, although now they have seemed to have been spliced with some sort of radioactive tomato. There are also some strange fish-like hunters which turn up later on, but they just reminded me of Zippy from Rainbow, so I mowed those bastards down. On the weapons front, we have a few returning favourites with the shotgun, grenade launcher and magnum. A small hint, make sure you do the electric current puzzle for the second door or the magnum will be lost forever, and also some new additions with the custom weapons, assault rifle and mine thrower. And of course the trademark rocket launcher at the end for anyone who remembered to rewrite their keycard. Where weapons management gets interesting this time round, however, is how you acquire ammo. There are boxes of shells and bullets scattered throughout the game, but for the most part you will be creating ammo out of gunpowder which can be combined to create different types of ammunition. This adds another level of gameplay decision making. You can either use all your A or B powders to make shotgun shells and bullets, and take out all of the game's standard enemies with ease, or do you struggle and save it and make 3 lots of C ammo to give yourself magnum rounds which you'll need to take on Nemesis. There is also a way to make enhanced bullets and shotgun rounds, but I couldn't for the life of me remember how to do it. I could have googled it easily, but that would have meant moving out of my seat. Resident Evil 3 is a different game to its predecessors. It's shorter, there are less puzzles, more action, only one character, but I believe despite all of this, it oddly has more replayability than the others. Especially with the Mercenaries mode that is unlocked after completion, which is just a blast. I also think what makes all 3 of these games really pleasing is the well constructed engine they play on. I could run around these fixed camera angles all day shooting things and I'd always be entertained. For me it's up there with the Infinity engine. Having mostly praised the game up to this point, I think it's only fair to give it its criticisms. With the exception of the Nemesis fights, the game is way too easy and there are no other boss battles. Regular enemies are simple cannon fodder and there are way too many zombies opposed to the more interesting monsters available to fight. I also felt that the story was a little less relevant this time round. Not that I ever really entertained Resident Evil's bonkers plot, but the first game was such a shock to the system that you actually felt the need to explore every avenue and decipher what was going on, and the second was better constructed to include plot points into gameplay without taking you too far away from the action. It's also a little on the short side, and some of the locations you visit, such as the hospital, I would have been happy with them being a bit bigger, as it would have helped to have given weight to the intention of you being there, rather than more of a straight in, straight out feeling. But regardless of any of that, I still had fun, and it has made me want to play for the other games again. Unfortunately though, Resident Evil 2, while it works on PC, doesn't like to save your game properly. I saved in the police station as Claire, and when I went to load it up it said I was in the item room as Leon. Weird. So I'll stick to the Dreamcast version. If you haven't played Resident Evil 3, or any Resident Evil game for that matter prior to 4, do check it out. You can buy the PC copy for about £3 and it works fine with Windows 7 at 1024 by 768. A little tip, hitting F3 will bring up the options and you have to right click on the empty key bindings to set your controller, which took me a hell of a lot longer to figure out than I would have liked. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope watching this has given you that little nostalgia trip needed to get you reinstalling.
You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.